You know, Roger, you talked about having cops that are educated. I work for 2 departments that required degrees. And I got to tell you, we did a study and found it did not make a difference. It was just, now that's in these 2 departments that I work for. You know, you were having complaints against officers with degrees just as frequently as you were having with the ones without degrees. It comes down to how well you interact with people, how well you can read a situation. That's something that cannot be taught in college. You know, college can teach on all these philosophies and these different theories, but they're not teaching you social skills. They're not teaching you how to determine, you know, read people when their emotions are changing, you know, or is this person a threat? And see, then when you look at situations where you got cops pulling up, they see you as a threat. The minute they see you in the car, you know, now you're going to try to work to de-escalate that situation. Obviously, it's not our job. It's not my job to make you feel better or put you at ease with me, because you pull me over and you treat me one way, and you pull a white guy over and you end up treating him another.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that white guy can be the one that kills you.
Yeah.
You know, but you give him the benefit of the doubt. What did we say? Membership has its privileges.
Oh yeah.
That's what happens in a lot of these situations. You know, you the person that you think won't hurt you is the one that ends up killing you. So you have to look at these situations from our perspective as being the ones that encounter law enforcement, and we have to be savvy enough to realize that this situation with this police officer could go south at any given moment. You know, but you wait for the cop to make that move. You don't automatically assume that the cop is, you know, he's coming up here, he's going to have a bad attitude, or he's going to harass me, or I know how this is going to go. No, you don't. You give them an opportunity to cross that line, you know, before you think about doing something that could, make a bad situation worse. And I think that message is not being communicated enough, you know, because with all this yelling and, you know, you talking to the police officer and you yelling and screaming. I've seen people recording police officers that their actions and what they're saying, they're doing more damage by provoking the police officer. Now, you know, the cop might be, you can record me. I'm not looking to put you in jail, but you keep running your mouth. Now I'm going to start looking for ways to put you in jail.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to be stressed. You know, don't make a bad situation worse, because in some situations, we're our own worst enemy. See, these are the things that we need to be stressing to, you know, our families and loved ones. You know, like when you interact with the police, you should not do anything. Well, that's stupid, you know, right. Because taking off running, I'm running away from you. I'm not a threat. There's no reason for you to shoot. But if I'm just that anxious and nervous, like the officer was with Philando Castile, and in this situation, they could be inclined to pull out their gun and just start shooting, you know. So that's that's me on my soapbox, and that's my perspective. Okay, but like I said, you're talking, you know, I was a second generation police officer, and my old man and I, like I said, we talked on a deeper level. And what was so amazing to me when we'd had these discussions is that the things he was going through on the police department in the 50s and the 60s, as far as, you know, what cops were doing that was discriminatory, it was racist and everything else, I was dealing with in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s.
Wow.
The only thing it changed was the years and the decades. It was the same thing. You know, he said, yeah, I dealt with that. And he would tell me stories about the stuff he would had to deal with, you know, and I'm like, Dad, I'm dealing with the same thing right now. Now, you know, Roger, you talked on your friend of yours was on CPD, you know, and it made me think about, I do a lot of work in Chicago, and one of the young ladies I work with, she and it's a sister, and she's married to a white police, you know, she's married to a white guy. He's a police officer, and they have teenage sons. And her husband was originally a Chicago police officer, but he quit because it was just too much. He felt like the public wasn't supporting him, you know, supporting the department. And he ended up going out to one of the suburbs. And she was watching the whole Laquan. Am I saying this guy's name right? Laquan McDonald?
Yeah.
Okay. She was watching that whole incident unfold, and she became very concerned about her son, you know, interacting with the police. And it was that at that point she had a discussion with her husband, and her husband said, well, you know what? If he had done what the police officers told him to do, he'd still be alive. And she said at that point, she realized that her husband might see things differently being a white guy and a police officer than she and her sons, especially as it relates to how her son might be treated with the police. And lo and behold, her son got pulled over by the police and just talked about the officer was just so rude to him. And he says, and the father kept chiming, well, you should have shut up. You should have. He said, Dad, I didn't say a word. He got out of the car with a bad attitude and pushed me up against the car. And, you know, but the father was more concerned about justifying the police officer's action than being concerned about the safety and the treatment of his sons. And that, she said, that infuriated her so much. And, you know, she says now, you know, she's reevaluating not just her relationship, but, you know, his role as, you know, the protector of the family, particularly as it relates to her sons. And that's a heck of a thing to deal with.
Yeah, that's difficult. Good, Greg, I got a question to ask you.
Go ahead.
In your training, and maybe this doesn't happen, are there precincts or police departments that make it a requirement to understand some of the history of policing, i.e., and especially as it pertains to the Black community, slavery? I mean, police, correct me if I'm wrong about this, policing was born of, you know, my last name is Connolly. Mm-hmm. I'm not Irish, but the overseers probably were. So my family took that name. This is the people they were probably closest to, you know, my descendants who were slaves.
Right.
And they ended up taking that name because they probably just had a first name that probably wasn't theirs in the first place anyway. Is that history ever taught that policing in the beginning was to keep us being Black people in our communities, or to bring us back to that place, you know, that plantation or whatever, and it escalated from there, especially after Reconstruction, you know?
Right, right.
Because policemen didn't always exist the way that they exist right now, you know, but it seems to have gotten worse, and that original premise seems to still be with us.
Right.
You know, if you could speak on that.
Okay, I've never experienced anything of that nature. I've never even heard people talk about it within law enforcement training circles. As far as the history that might be discussed, or that it was discussed in my experience, it's just one department was more adamant about this than the other, because one didn't talk about history of the department at all. The only history they talked about were officers that had been killed in the line of duty. But the other department that I worked for, they talked extensively about the history of the department, even to the point they talked about the first Black officers that were hired on the department. But they did not go into, you know, the original concept of formation, the purpose of forming, why police departments were formed in the first place, you know, and you have to be realistic about it. Their perspective can be totally different from ours, you know, and it doesn't matter what the factual history is. You know, because there are people out there, you know, you got a lot of them running around right now. One of the reasons this country is divided. I don't care what the truth is. I'm going to believe what I want to believe.
Right. What makes me feel comfortable.
You know, and we talk about changing people's hearts and minds. No. That does not, you know, that has not worked for us.
Right.
We have to be realistic about what the situation is. That doesn't mean we have to go around hating people. No. But, you know, the thing is, doesn't mean that we have to walk around being stupid. We've been naive for too long in a lot of situations, and it's been to our own detriment. We have to be, you know, I always say this: quit waiting on somebody else to protect you or take care of you. Take care of yourself. You know, I'm just waiting, you know, well, I counted up. No, Don't be that naive. You know, we always expect somebody else to do something for us, or we expect them to do their job. You can't count, you know, you can be what I call realistically optimistic, you know, hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst.
Right. That's what I think, you have to be engaged.
Yep.
I think that's so very important. And, you know, one of the things that I think the Republicans did really well, put themselves in the position that they're in right now, they went after a lot of state houses. Mm-hmm. And I know we talk about the problem. We could talk about that forever, but if we're going to elicit change, and like you said before, you're not going to change what's in anybody's heart.
No.
But you can change the legislation.
Right.
You know, if we now engage politically and concentrate more on some of these state houses and stuff to get more people of color in position to make some of these decisions, that's the only way I can see we can get some change out of this.
Right.
You know.
Well, yeah. And it's sad that it comes down to that, because, you know, there was a time we were a more hopeful people.
Yeah.
And we were given the system the opportunity to work for us. You know, we trusted it to some degree, but, you know, in the last 5 years, that trust is pretty much going out the window.
Oh, yeah, it's bad on both sides. Yeah.
It is. It's bad, not just both sides, it's bad on all sides.
Yeah, all sides, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want to, you know, we got the future coming up on these podcasts, and we can talk about policing more in depth. I just wanted to touch on it. And you see, the thing is, it's a very sensitive issue for us and our community, because, I mean, how many of you guys have actually had, well, before I ask this question, go ahead, Rod, you want to say something?
I just want to add really quick something Ross touched on.
Mm-hmm.
And like he said, it's the people who are legislative, who are in the House. People can a lot of times be so focused on putting mandates in, or no, it's actually the people we need to really focus on is who is being elected to these seats,
mm-hmm.
because they're the lawmakers.
Right.
And I honestly must say that over the course of this year, last year with the election and everything going on, I tell people, don't try and push yourself for the popular vote or X, Y, and Z, or lesser two evils. I said, take a time, look up that candidate for whatever they're running for, and study their background, see what their beliefs are, see if they align with what you are seeking to see change and make different. Align it to where you want to see the opportunities change. And I said, if you do your homework, and I did mine, I took the opportunity to say, okay, if I'm where I'm at, okay, let me study the history of this candidate, not just where they went to school, but what are their beliefs, you know, politically, what they aspire. Look up anything that you can. I mean, there's so much technology out there. You know, people have had meetings and events and everything, and that, of course, would be helpful. You know, and I truly believe if people take a moment, just study the candidate, do your own research. I tell people stay off not just the F channel, but also Facebook too, because you got a lot of people out there who are Facebook pastors to Facebook newscasters, and nobody's qualified, and they pass over so many conspiracy theories. And I said, you got to do your own research and homework in order to find out, does this person's or people or this party align with what my beliefs are, you know, not just spiritually, but also what I want to see the difference for my kids and the generations to come.
Absolutely.
That's the right people. Excellent point.
Yeah. So if you put the right people in the seat, you'll see the change happen.
And you're right, but it's finding the right person, you know.
Yep.
Because a lot of times these people talk a good game until they get elected. Because I'm still trying to figure out what the heck has Congress accomplished in the last 8 to 10 years? Really? I mean, we've had this gridlock up there for so long that, I mean, it seems like we're paying people for doing nothing. I mean, what are they actually accomplishing?
Keeping their seats. That's their jobs. They want a career there. You know, the killing thing about it is with corporations now, because let's face it, our country is controlled. This world is by corporations. When corporations get to the point where they send in lobbyists to write the laws for us, that's fascism. We're there. You know, we are there. And people, that's not going to be good for, I don't care what color you are. And people have got to wake up to that. And that starts with these conversations about history. That's why I think there's such a campaign by those in the hegemony, 30% of them or so, against what's now being taught in schools. We've never been given the full story. And I think that grows empathy right there. When people start to say, whoa, wait a minute, this happened? You know, you remember when Tulsa came out? Now, we knew about it since we were kids. That was talked about and stuff. But to see the reaction of some of my family members and stuff, who may be white and stuff, and some of the other friends that I have, I had to say to them, oh, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Right. I mean, there's so many stories where this has gone on, and those things were never taught. I think that is something that's so important. We will get a better group of leaders if that's the case. You know, also, too, I mean, you might have to think about term limits and stuff, whatever. You're going to make a career out of doing that. I know continuation is a vital thing in order to get programs passed and then have them be sustained, you know, but now I think because there's such a large campaign against how people are educated, that must have hit a nerve, you know.
Well, and it is. There are a lot of people nervous. There are a lot of people trying to hold on to what they've had for a very long time. Right. And they have their fear about losing it. And as a result, they're acting on that fear. And because they're doing that, it's negatively impacting everybody else, even their own. They might not see it or realize it, but that's exactly what's happening, you know. But like I said, we'll talk about some of these details, some of these things in upcoming podcasts. I don't want to have some, as I said, their primary focus is the safety concerns of our people and our community. And with that being said, I sent you guys out some questions earlier that I wanted to discuss with you, and I think this would be a good time to do it. Okay. Okay. And we'll start off with the first question. Okay. Do you keep up with the personal attacks against people in our community? And when I say that, I mean, it's just what we were talking about earlier. What we saw happen at the mall, and us being the biggest victims of hate crime. See, that's another thing. We have consistently been the biggest victims of hate crimes in this country for years. And when I was teaching at the police academy, I went through several courses about hate crimes and domestic terrorism. And, it was just, we have no idea how many hate crimes are perpetrated against us. But I'm not just talking about hate crime. I'm just talking about attacks on us, period. And that can up to and including black on black crime. But I mean, do you guys keep up with it? What's going on in your own communities and neighborhoods?
Yeah, I'll go first. And again, I'll keep my comments short. That way, we can try to get through all the questions.
Yeah. No, man, you go ahead. Take your time.
Hey, but you picked the right group. You got a good group of guys right here who,
exactly
want to get the message out. But, I keep up with the personal attacks in my community. There's so much of it. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with all of it.
Right.
So I do keep up. And as I learn things, whether it's on local TV, whether it's smart news, whether it's, social media, I use it as a teaching point, education to my kids, and heck, even my grandkids right now. So we have to keep up at what's going on. We have to keep our head on the swivel. We have to pay attention, and we have to be on guard at every second of the day. And like a wise old friend of mine once said, you got to be like a boxer. You got to protect yourself at all times, which means you got to pay attention. You got to be cognizant of everything around you.
Why your friend got to be wise and old? The wise part is okay, but why they got to be old?
Because he's 5 months older than me.
All right, that's a good point. That is so true. That is so true. Okay, you other guys?
I get to live an example in my neighborhood of what it could be like. For others who may not live there. Now, I keep up with the things that happen, especially to us, especially in surrounding communities. But in my immediate area here in Ypsilanti, near Ford Lake, I've watched the diversity grow in the neighborhood. And this is where I'm living at right now for the past 10 years. we've got athletes, Imani Bates, Lincoln and stuff, that community. You have your issues at times with race, but because we are so diverse in this neighborhood, every ethnic group is here. Every religious group is here. In just in my subdivision alone. And we have the support of police. I remember coming back from Chicago from a job that I had there. I had gotten my vehicle broken into. And I lived in the next subdivision. The police found a lot of my stuff, came to the door. You know, a lot of cops that come in, we know each other by name. It's not that small, but that's what I wish every community could have. That's why the diversity is so very, very important. Now, to keep up with things that are going on around me, outside of our safe community, if you want to say that, I'm not that far from Detroit. Other areas in Ann Arbor, they've had some problems there with, rapes, things of that nature at times. We've had issues with cops outside the area, like in the next township or so. I'm not that far from Howell, so you hear about it there. You'll see things locally. Our local football team, Belleville, finally won state after being stopped a couple of times by Howell because they wouldn't come here to play, or the cheating that goes on. So it's the attitude of the people in some of these areas that lead to police officers following you around as soon as you come into that area looking for something to get you for. It's fortunate that has to happen. So when I drive back into my subdivision or in my area here and stuff, I feel a sigh of relief, especially for the young Thundercats in my family and stuff. So the young guys, that's what I worry about the most, and like we said previously too, that, when people get pulled over, how they're supposed to act when that's supposed to happen. You shouldn't have to think like that, But yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, and we'll talk about this some other time too, I'm making a list of all those things that happen too, to people and stuff, whatever, around the nation and especially in this state. Certain areas where we probably have to politically get more involved in it there and try to elicit some type of change, because I think it does start you can have the grassroots with it, but it starts from at that point from the top down and stuff. So
right,
you're going to make changes to it. Right.
That's true. Good point. Roger?
I can almost relate to Ross because where I live, it's a good mixture over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. I've seen a lot of interracial families relocating, living out this way. There are more Black families that I've seen. And over the years, the same officers that have served in the community, I've gotten to know over years since we moved here. Either I met them through events, or I think I had maybe a couple of traffic stops here and there. Got to know them over time, see them in the store. But I have been I've been watchful for one of the neighboring towns, not too far from here, which is Joliet. Joliet is like a mini Chicago.
Yeah,
and
Ford Heights, all those places over there.
Ford Heights.
Yeah.
And actually, what has helped me is the line of work that I've been in. I've dealt face to face with these young males that have been incarcerated, have been in juvenile detention centers, and I've, and they wanted the second chance for education. So I've had some stories. They've told me some dark stories, and I find out ways as to whom to get connected to help make these improvements, because much of it has to do with that. They here in Chicago, the way it appears is you have Black on Black crime,
right,
often. But see, what I found out is my friend Jonathan, who's a police officer for CPD, and then a friend of mine, Christoria, she's a lieutenant, and they both told me, and they said, you'd be surprised that the media will not disclose and discuss a number of the crimes that go on within a lot of your Latino community, Caucasian community, Jewish community. It's all over. But they want to highlight oftentimes the Black ones only because they're trying to orchestrate a type of fear, because they know that for whatever reason, no matter what type of opposition we face, we keep coming back because we happen to have such a capacity to keep pushing the bar and going forward. Like, we're not afraid. And so thankfully I have some connections that I get to find out in detail about what much more we can get involved and do things differently. So the line of work that I'm in now, and then I've connected with some people that work for Obama Foundation, because they're opening that Obama Presidential Center. They're building that here in Chicago. And actually I was, I was presented with the opportunity to maybe do some work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll allow me to get more details and specifics of something that we can do differently, because the biggest thing is to cut down on the crime is creating more employment opportunities for these young bucks, because they're starting to see that if they don't have any other options as far as what they can utilize their skill sets for, they're going to be on the street corners. So I'm in a place at a college that's in one of the suburbs of Chicago, which is Chicago Heights, which is it's 50-50. But there are a lot of, those who come from Chicago that they're looking for that second opportunity. So I'm seeing the long-term perspective of, with everything going right, we could see things diminish, because now these young males have their CDL license, they have their CDL, they have forklift training, they have any other form of farming that doesn't put them on the street, but it gives them the capacity to do an honest day's work. And with that, we teach them the social skill set, because they, in their mind, so many things that still orchestrating what they see or try to prove a territory. That's why a lot of these officers in the city, and when I see the news, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Where, shootings on the freeway, people getting killed, like they're shooting down off of overpass now.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2 years ago, there's an L train that runs through one of the busiest interstates in Chicago going towards downtown. Guys were throwing garbage cans onto the highway.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you hear a lot of disputes. And so there's so much going on with I'm putting myself in a place where I'm getting involved now with, because even though I'm out here, but I'm being very active in the approach to what's going on in the city, because I have 2 teenage sons, and they're going to be grown men in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And they've seen me, and I've taken them everywhere, and I continue to take them everywhere where I can, where they can go with me, so they can see not only what I discuss and talk about, but what they need to understand. Because I tell them, you're not going to get it from a YouTube video. You're not going to get it from the news.
No.
I got to show you reality, and understand on how you need to be prepared. Like my youngest one, he focused on, Dad, I'm going to play basketball and play pro. I said, son, that's great and all, but there's some things I got to teach you about your speech, the way that you dress as you get older, because your appearance is going to make a big difference too.
Mm-hmm.
And how you carry yourself, how you handle situations, all of that's being observed. It goes out to work and I'm meeting people. Yeah, people may say, hey, Roger Fisher, yeah, he's a cool guy, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, I'm being watched, I'm being observed.
Mm-hmm.
How I handle things, how I handle conflict in situations, or if whatever the case may be. And they expect, and funny thing is, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of people are surprised. They don't think of, when you hear the name Roger Fisher, a 6'4" Black man.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They think
Right.
a white guy.
Right.
They think of a white guy today. No, when they see me, they're like, "You're Roger Fisher." I'm like, "Yes, sir. Your middle name is Fitzgerald?" "Yes, it is." And it was like, oh, and they said, and then it's funny because when they find out, oh wow, I didn't. Oh man, I said, yeah, but it's helping them look past the objective of saying, and that's why I tell my sons, I don't want people to look at you and think the first thing they see is if you're big and tall, you play sports, or you into music. I said, there's so much more to your life. And what I'm starting to see is getting kids and all these young adults that I have an opportunity to help, getting them really exposed to things in which they're really good at. Because if you take them out of that hostile environment, getting them away from all that trouble, you'll start to see some things differently. And even connecting with organizations that help. So even though I'm out here, I just can't sit here and allow myself to see it on TV. So I spend much amount of my time getting heavily involved. My church is in the city, and it allows me to stay active, and I care. I mean, I still have a few of them from time to time, whether Facebook or text message, that have been in trouble, that have been in jail, and they'll reach out to me, "Hey, Mr. Fisher, so-and-so, I was letting you know I got this gig going on," and I'll give them whatever word of advice that I can give them or any insight. And I say, "Hey, I'll be looking to come to the city, and we're going to run this event. So I'll make sure you guys come out to it." So just continue to be involved, because even though I can be out here, I can't sit by idle, because my sons are going to grow up and they're going to want to be around and see other young Black men their age, and they grow up together. And I want them to get a clear picture of that, not just being out in the suburbs, but I explain to them, if by all means, if I can have them go to a HBCU, to play sports, to get that camaraderie of our culture, because it'll help you better understand and bond, but also at the same time, they predominantly have been in, hold on a second.
Oh,
They,
hey, let me just, hey, Greg, can
Go
I
ahead,
interject?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Okay.
I got
One thing I forgot to mention, because again, when it comes to your question, Greg, I kind of reread it a couple times, and I'll be brief. I'll be brief so we can go on to the next question. But I define our community as not just my block,
Right,
or my
The borders
city.
of the neighborhood.
Right, exactly. Because all of us are professional. All of us care about our families. We're gonna live in decent neighborhoods. But I look at my community, far outreaches my block, even my city, even my church. So that's my community, the school system, all of that. So
that's good point.
I think, so I think that's the question you were asking, Greg, about our community.
Right.
Everybody had great feedback. Ross and Roger, great feedback on their, individual situations. But as a Black community, our community reaches and stretches so far, we have to pay attention, outside our gates. So I at least wanted to throw that in, because that's what I thought the question, the way you worded the question.
Go on to these things to get more refined. This is the first time we're doing it too.
Right,
And
right.
All intelligent brothers too and stuff. We'll learn how to hone in on doing this.
Right.
So we keep it structured.
Yeah.
Right.
It's and you're right, Kent. Both of you, in the fact that our community, our people are our community.
Yes.
That's just it. All of our people.
Yep.
We can't say, well, they don't live out here with me, so I don't care what they do with and the thing is, none of us live in the city. All born and raised in one of the toughest cities on the face of the earth, and none of us live in the city wherever we live. That's something all right.
Right.
But Raj, I want to tell you, man, you need to be applauded because you are still you're reaching back, and that's what we need more of. We've all done it, but we don't do it enough. Right. So for you to continue to do that, man, I truly applaud you.
Absolutely. He's in the battleground too. He's in Chicago.
Man.
I mean, that's almost ground zero right there.
Yeah, but
right.
It is. I tell people, when they say, I said, well, I'm not living there, but somebody has to.
Yep.
Exactly.
Hey,
exactly.
Yeah.
My pastor says, he's a physician, being in the city. He said, even though you come in these four walls of the church, your real ministry and your work is out there.
Mm-hmm.
You are the church. You represent, the body of Christ and your ministry. If you think about it, that was Jesus' ministry. He wasn't sitting inside a church. He wasn't around saved folk. He was out there looking to lead people in the right direction. And so that's what it's all about, reaching back and bringing them along, because we can't depend on, and the picture I painted for the young people, and I said to them, hey, you spend off a lot of time on Facebook or in Instagram, and you're trying to compare and compete with other people. But I told them, I said, do you know every time you get on these forums, you making somebody that doesn't look like you, especially with the melanin in your skin, rich? So what does that tell you? How are you spending your time? Create opportunities for yourself versus having to pour into other people who, quite honestly, is not pouring back into you. And I said, let's look at this thing a little differently. So I asked the tough questions. I have confronted and been in front of some of the most toughest, notorious young adult males that have been in gangs that were a part of it. But I don't know if they saw me like Morgan Freeman and, Joe Clark, but, I've had those moments with them. But at the same time, those are the ones that come crying in my office or text me on my phone 2 years later telling me, I'm so glad that we had that talk. Now I'm doing better. And that's all it is. And if you take the time to just listen to what they really need, like I truly believe if officers take a moment and just really connect with the community and stop just pulling them over. I said, sometimes go into the community and just kind of see where things are at, bring stuff to them and find out what they need. And you'd be surprised. They just want a chance better than what they've had. So, that I have many other things that I'll be sharing on future podcasts that I've been experiencing and working on. So, this is a great segment tonight.
Yeah.
Wow.
And,
Good point.
You touched on something, going to the community, what's going on. Back in the 80s, there was a big push for what was called community-oriented policing, or like in the city of Houston, their case, they called it neighborhood-oriented policing. And that was the main idea, to get the police into the community so they could see, so both sides could pretty much see the other side as being human. It was that simple. I know, Kent, when we were growing up, they had the PAL program.
Yeah, we had.
Yep. And and the thing is, if you notice, a lot of that has gone away. And it wasn't that the community left the police left the community. And for whatever reason, I mean, it could have been intentional, it could have been budgetary, or for whatever reason. And because I had an old lieutenant, he used to crack me up. He said, you know what? He said, we started having, he was an old country guy. He said, we started having all these problems when they stuck these cops in the cars. Now, this is an old school cop talking, like you say, when they stuck police officers in the cars. I'm like, man, when were police officers not in the car? And he says, if we want to get things, he said, if we want things to get better in the community, these cops need to unass these cars and get out there and start walking the car. I just started cracking up, but he's right. That's,
Yeah.
And I spent a few years in community service dealing with people in the community. And when I was out in Colorado, we were seeing that great influx of gang traffic, and gang influence coming into the community and taking over. And, I interacted with a lot of those, just like you did, Raj. you know, and the thing is, you know, some of them, and I'm saying all of them, you know, you gotta be realistic. Some of them you're not going to reach, and they don't want to be reached. Yeah.
Yep.
But the ones
There's quite
that
a few
did,
that there was quite a few that I couldn't.
right.
I just couldn't, and they put themselves in positions I had. Some of them react really belligerent, and you know, I just said, well, I ain't gonna forget about them, but sure enough, we pray that hopefully, if it's not me, then maybe some form of consequence that doesn't cost them their life will teach them.
Right.
So they listen to, you know,
Right.
us.
Right. And you help the ones you can help. That's all you do. I mean, if you help one, hey, you done more than enough.
Yeah,
so
one.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next question because I want to wrap this up. Okay. Second question. What do you see as the biggest threats to your personal safety, your family, children, and your community or our community?
I'm going to make this real quick. I've thought about this often enough too. Lack of meaningful education. And that means for everybody, not just for the brothers in my community and stuff, but for a lot of other ethnic groups too, especially the hegemony, especially white people, you know, and that lack of empathy, you know. I think I've mentioned that before. I think those two things go hand in hand. If our history, and I mean the history here in the United States, is taught the way it should be, that will invoke some empathy, you know, because most people, I don't care what color you are, you want the same things. Every family wants the same thing, you know. So there has to be some common ground someplace, you know, and I think that's the greatest threat to my existence, and having a conversation oftentimes about some of this subject matter where I may be the only Black person that's there. I have to make sure that I know more about it historically. So like I said before, so that it's more thought provocative for me to fight back and for somebody to say, well, I didn't know that, you know. And because of this lack of education and now this attack upon it now, I think that's the greatest threat, you know, personally for me, you know. We've got to do something about that, you know.
Right.
Yep. And we can't have these draconian laws now being created, especially in your state of Texas too and stuff, trying to stop, you know, what's going on, you know, with our educational system. You know, it's already bad enough, and now you want to make it even worse. You know, I mean, natives didn't call themselves Indians because Christopher Columbus didn't discover the land. He was trying to get the Indian in the first place anyway.
He was in the wrong place.
Oh, yeah. They need to be told stuff. So I don't feel subjugated. So we as a people who are not educated enough about these things at times don't feel subjugated. And those who are the subjugators don't feel as if they have some, you know, some standing of stuff that says that, you know, this is correct when I'm thinking because the things that I've been taught in history, you know, so. And I think that's the greatest threat.
Okay. That's a good point.
Right.
What's the biggest threats? And Ross, he hit one of them right on the head. Well, two of them. And that was on my list. But the biggest threats is ignorance.
Oh, yeah.
Uninformed. Naive. Of course, poverty.
Yeah.
Uneducated. It all is intertwined.
Right.
We're not prepared. You know, if we take care of some of those first 4 or 5 things I mentioned, you know, is it going to get rid of the problem? No. But we as a people, we've got to take control of our own communities. We've got to be in control of being informed, what's going on around us. We have to stop being naive and stop worrying about just what's on TV about athletes and entertainers and look at the real world. Okay.
Exactly.
You know, I like sports. You see my collection back here just as well as anybody else. But, you know, I have to be informed of what's going on around me. You know, I don't live in a $10 million house, you know. So we got to stop being naive. We got to be prepared for any and everything at any given moment, 24/7, 365. Okay.
Definitely.
We have to stop looking at right now. Okay. And I'm trying to be but I had so many points. We got to stop looking at right now. You know, we need to stand in line to go vote. You know, we talk about all these other things about these politicians. We got to go stand in line and vote. We'll go stand in line to get the newest Jordans.
And for chicken sandwiches and hair weaves.
Yeah.
Right.
No
and trust me, just like my youngest son, he got a collection. I've stood in line for him to get his shoes because the boy's educated. He's getting his master's. He's done everything I've asked him to do. Okay. But at the same time, I'm gonna stand in line to go vote.
Right.
Okay. I worked on Obama's first election as a poll watcher and a poll greeter. Okay. So I put in the time. So we need to put in the time to the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nothing wrong with going to buy whatever shoes you want, but are you investing in your community? And that, goes to what Roger was talking about. Racism is a big threat.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to go away.
Nope.
We have to be cognizant. All of my sister-in-laws, all my brothers-in-law, they're black. All of their wives are white. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
I love all my nieces and nephews. I love my sisters-in-law. And to me, I have to help educate them.
Yes.
Because, my wife grew up in a predominantly, white small town. They didn't get the Black history that we got. So that goes back to education, what I was talking about.
Yeah.
We got to educate the younger group, especially if they never had the education. And Greg, you probably had this too. At my elementary school back in the day, and Roger, you might know this, we had a Black encyclopedia set.
Mm-hmm.
I still got mine.
Okay, I need to find that. So, again, it's about education. Another threat, and when it goes back to not prepared, I'm always packing. I'm always carrying because I'd rather have my weapon with me just in case something breaks out because I got to protect me and mine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Other threat, we're not speaking up as a community. We're not speaking up as men, as black men today. We need to take back our communities, take back control. Okay. I will be nice to whoever, but it's up to me to protect my house.
Right.
And my house is far reaching.
Exactly.
We need to look at the signs of things going on. I think this is my last point. Sorry, I didn't mean to be so long, guys.
That's all right, bro.
But I think my other point is we got to look at the signs of what's going on. Mm-hmm. Again, that goes back to keep your head on the swivel, see what's going on around you, and educating not just your house, but educating, your friends, your coworkers. And I will say this also: when George Floyd happened, I was surprised by the number of white individuals that reached out to me. What can I do? Well, what you can do is speak up. All right. If you at your barbecue during the 4th of July with your white family, and this was a white young lady that reached out to me, I said, blah, 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 called her by name and we're really tight. I said, if you see something, say something. So if Cousin Skeeter's over there getting full because he's had a 12-pack of cold ones, he's going to say anything. Okay. So if he says the N-word, like, hold on, Cousin Skeeter, don't say that. You see something, you say something. So I need my white brothers and sisters to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And with them staying silent, that just makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
Just like I spoke to you, I spoke up on a Zoom call with 500 people. And I said it just the way I said it. I need my white brothers and sisters. And I just said it because of,
right.
That was the predominant audience. I need y'all to speak up and say something.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
See something, say something. And that goes for Hispanic, that goes for Asians, Samoans, whoever, Turkish. So, all right, I'm done.
Humanity is humanity. There you go.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, I would just say from what I've seen, not to go off on a tangent, but just from the biggest threat is there's a lack of empathy and transparency with our other ethnicity group in which some, if not most, within that community across town, look past the melanin and look at the value and the character of a person. Because if you keep doing this in the area of athletics, people are not ever want to recruit any other student or most of the students coming from this district because you're favorites. You got to stop it. So that's the whole. That's why I've gotten more involved with getting to know these coaches and the school district people and administrators, so that I'm the one that says, "Hey, look, great opportunity for every kid, because you're going to miss out on a lot of talent if all you keep doing is pushing the agenda for who is your favorite or whose parent pays the most school boosters money. Forget all that. If you want to win, if you want to see things happen, you gotta look at the content of that character and that player's ability, and stop looking at how fat your paycheck is going to be and who's filling your pockets."
It seems insurmountable number of problems that we have to deal with in our community, and that is without talking about how our interactions with other races actually go. The problems that we have with these other races. Because all you got to do is look at the history of the Middle Eastern population in the city of Detroit. Man, we've had certain incidents up there that actually caused riots.
Yes.
And so, these are things that we have to be aware of and have to always take into consideration when we're dealing with people. Everybody should be more empathetic, but you can't like they always say, you can't legislate morality, but you also can't legislate empathy.
Right. You can't. You can't.
I don't. But at the same time, it's not my job to get you to like me,
right?
You see, or like my people. All I want is respect and to be treated fairly. And too many times when we've done, man, all you got to do is look at these race riots. The race riots that took place where they burned down Black Wall Street in Tulsa and these other places that are going on, Rosewood, all Black people want to do is be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
Just give us an opportunity to go out here, build our communities, and be successful. Yeah. You worried about us moving into your neighborhood, but back when we were on our own neighborhoods, you had to come in there and burn them down.
Yeah,
burn them down alone.
Exactly. and the sad thing about it, in some people out there, that same type of mentality or that same type of hateful desire still persists.
Yeah,
still exists. And that's the thing when I talk, one of the aspects when I talk about us staying safe, you have to take that into consideration. I mean, I'm going to talk in the future about, recognizing warning signs, how to identify people that you interact with every day. You see what's going on, and you like, well, I work with this guy every day, or, we socialize. And then all of a sudden something changed. I give a perfect example, James Byrd in Jasper, Texas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about the guy, he just recently got killed on a hunting trip.
Right.
Yeah. He went with some co-workers.
And they said, well, it was a hunting accident, but you shot him in the back several times. How's that a hunting accident?
Right.
So, I know, Greg, I know you've talked about this before. I don't mean to go on with it and stuff, but it was a thought that I had earlier when we had earlier part of the conversation about interaction with other police officers and what may be their motives for doing such things. I remember Bill Cosby's son was killed, Enos.
Right.
That stopped. And then if they got deeper into it, and I'm sure that I've heard this too, that there was a kid that was jumping into a gang and he had to go kill somebody that was Black.
Right.
And I know this might sound a little bit far-fetched to some, but I can imagine police officers being in a little bit of fraternity who have that thing. My initiation into this is like, if I can get one of them darkies in that situation and stuff, where I can put a couple of them in them, and then I'm all in the club, So, and I'm sure
it's ironic you say that, because they talked about some police department out in California that had a secret organization, a club within the department. I can't remember which department it was or which department it is, that they investigated them and found out, well, and that's not the only police department where that's taking place. And, you can't be as naive to sit up and say, oh, no, and that's what happens to us in a lot of cases. I just can't believe that law enforcement would stoop to such levels. You better wake up.
Yep.
You better wake up.
Yep.
If if it's an excellent documentary on Showtime right now called Attica. and it's about the prison riot that takes place in Attica. I mean, and you look at what happened there, you know, when you have state troopers, now this is up in New York, when they were going in here trying to quell this, it really wasn't a riot, but it was a revolt where they, you know, just, I'm not going to say, well, it was for the most part, it was peaceful. It was a peaceful revolt trying to get better conditions in the prison. But when they went in there to break that up, you actually had these, some of these state troopers yelling white power.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And you watch the Capitol with the police that are there.
Yeah.
I mean, you see how that changes with, you know.
Exactly. So, you know,
you have to heard Adam in.
We have to be realistic about these things, fellas. So, you know.
Even going to the White House with a Confederate flag. But they did it.
We listen, that's a total, man, we could talk for 3 hours on that, on the insurrection. You know. We'll save that for a later date.
Yeah, different one, yeah.
I want to thank you guys for being on a part of this. I think we started something that is good, useful, and helpful. We put it out there. We hope other people find it, you know, just as valuable as we do.
There we go.
And we'll just, as I said, continue to do this, especially because there's so much going on. We'll always have a bunch of relative topics to be discussing in the future because there's always something impacting us one way or another. And, you know, between our insight, experiences, and what'd you say, Kent? Old wisdom, you know, hopefully, you know, we can come to some solutions and it can help some people. All right. So thanks a lot, guys.
All right.
And have a good evening.